Hello everyone and welcome back inside the SCSN studios for another edition of the Motor City Roundup. I'm Genna Rose alongside Jason Ross Jr. It's already March, so the madness has commenced and we have plenty to talk about when it comes to Michigan and Michigan State basketball. Don't let the football helmet fool you. This is just the only college-based prop we have, but we'll get a basketball in here sometime soon. But Jason, what else can Detroit sports fans anticipate to hear on our show?
As you mentioned, Jen, no better month to be a basketball fan, but also there's plenty of other news to dive into. The Tigers are down in Lakeland for spring training, which is finally underway, and we're so pumped to dive into that. Pistons transaction news. We'll also have a Red Wings recap and preview of their upcoming series with the Tampa Bay Lightning here in Detroit. But to kick things off, as G noted, the madness has arrived. So we're going to get the show rolling this week with College Countdown. The Big Ten tournament gets underway on Tuesday night down in Indy. Michigan State is a number 9 seed, while the Wolverines are a number 1 seed, awaiting the winner of Michigan State and Maryland. That'll be a quarterfinal matchup potentially if Michigan State does get past Maryland to face Michigan. Just last week, we had our first 2 Michigan State-Michigan matchups. Michigan perhaps nailed down a number 1 seed with their convincing win over the Spartans last Thursday in Ann Arbor, but Michigan State bounced back on Sunday, G, at the Breslin. A Tom Izzo-esque win to cap off that week.
Yes, a 70-64 victory over the Wolverines, which could potentially stamp Tom Izzo's 23rd consecutive trip to the tournament. That'll be down in Indy. However, when we circle back to the game on Thursday night, Michigan won by 19, and they were coming off of a tough loss to Illinois. They were only shooting just over 28% from the three-point range. During that game, Michigan, they shot 44%, so they definitely bounced back. The Wolverines played tight perimeter defense. Michigan State did not make a single one of their threes. Michigan's Franz Wagner led the team with 19 points, and Hunter Dickinson had 10 rebounds. So, Jason, we'll have to see because they could potentially square up again moving forward.
I'm pumped for what could be another matchup, and the stakes are very high next week, or this week, I should say now, as the Big Ten tournament gets rolling. It'll be interesting to see how it does shake out the seeding in the NCAA tournament, depending on who wins this week. Well, we'll stick with the basketball theme on today's episode of the Motor City Roundup. Coming up next, we have Pistons talk for you.
The Detroit Pistons entered this weekend with the worst record in the Eastern Conference at 10-26. This could potentially place them in the top 5 when it comes to next year's NBA draft. However, the Pistons continue to look towards the future, and one of those open doors was the buyout of Pistons forward Blake Griffin.
Yeah, G, well, the 31-year-old forward hasn't played since February 12th after demanding a trade from Detroit, which never truly materialized, thanks in part to the polarizing salary of Blake Griffin that still had a pretty good chunk left on it owed this season. Now, this move only further pushes the notion of diving headfirst into the rebuild this season. And when you examine Blake Griffin's career after signing with the Nets on Sunday, he still has something to give to a contending team, and the Brooklyn Nets are certainly a contending team with Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving. Blake Griffin could be a piece that comes off the bench and provides you key playoff minutes as you look down the road here. Although the knee injuries coupled with his game moving further and further away from the rim have kind of contributed to the fact that Steve Nash, their head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, will only be able to play him for certain amounts of time. But this is an area where you can play for a limited time and still make an impact with a contending team. However, here in Detroit, we have a player in Jeremy Grant who will certainly be playing in each and every game that he can in a Detroit uniform.
Unfortunately, Grant missed 2 games last week due to a quad injury. However, the 26-year-old is having a career year and is currently a front runner for the NBA's Most Improved Player Award. Now looking at his stats this season, Grant is averaging just over 23 points per game. He's shooting over 43% from the field, over 36% from the three-point range, and is rebounding just over 5 times a game. Grant missed out on a maiden All-Star appearance. However, based off the previously mentioned numbers, he has certainly proven his worth as an All-Star caliber commodity. What doesn't show up in the numbers is his energy on the defensive end and his capability to guard the opposing team's best player night in and night out. The struggling Boston Celtics are a team name that have been thrown into the mix with Jeremy Grant as the trade deadline of March 25th approaches. However, Grant's great relationship with general manager Troy Weaver and his belief of him being a centerpiece for this team really goes to show that he will be in a Pistons uniform, or will hopefully be in a Pistons uniform long after the deadline is over.
I think a lot of fans would love to see him stick around, Jen. So, speaking of future of teams, the Tigers are building their future down in Lakeland right now, and we have some baseball talk for you coming up next on the Motor City Roundup.
Another player that hasn't necessarily locked down a roster spot but is garnering a lot of attention is Spencer Torkelson.
He's an infielder who, as you mentioned, garnering buzz unlike any other infielder in the Tigers organization right now as their #1 prospect entering this spring training. The #1 overall pick from last summer made his first base debut in that game on Wednesday against the Phillies. Prior to that, he inadvertently cut his finger while trying to open a can of beans to make some salsa with his roommates Riley Green and Jake Rogers. Had a bit of a mishap there and a cut on his finger that set him back a bit. But the roommates have since purchased a can opener so we can avoid any further injury. Then Torkelson on Friday made his debut at third base, where he was drafted last summer and garnered a lot of attention just because of that. He was tested early against the Yankees in that Friday game, had to make a diving stop to his left against a sizzling bullet off the bat of Aaron Judge at 110 miles per hour. And afterwards, manager A.J. Hinch said that, it's good to have him in those situations and recognize a bullet off the bat of a player like Aaron Judge. So wonderful to see these young players getting tested and growing and moving forward in their development.
Staying on the topic of position players, Niko Goodrum, he provides major flexibility for manager A.J. Hinch because he's a utility player. He can put him virtually in any position on the field besides as pitcher or catcher. And for the switch hitter, a major point of emphasis for him to improve on this season will be what he does from the left side of the plate. During his first 6 plate appearances, he reached base by way of 3 walks and 3 hits. And even during his first 3 games, he was 4 for 4 with 3 walks. And all of those were from the left side. So definitely a point of improvement for Goodrum as he moves forward. Not sure where necessarily we will see him out on the field, but again, he provides major flexibility for A.J. Hinch. But, now we got to switch gears and head on over to the Detroit Red Wings.
The Red Wings are currently in a particularly difficult part of their schedule, coming off a loss to the Carolina Hurricanes, who currently sit #2 in the Central Division. And up next, we'll have the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are the defending Stanley Cup champs and currently reside at the top of the Central. Now, G, to recap that loss to Carolina, didn't go the way they wanted to defensively, but there were some bright spots involved.
One of those spots was Filip Zadina, who pieced together a key performance from a confidence standpoint. The 21-year-old was actually able to score his 2nd goal of the season. He brought ample energy with him to each of his shifts, both offensively and defensively. Even though Zadina began the game with a missed opportunity on a breakaway, he had 4 shots in the first period alone. Then during the second period, Zadina scored a short side goal from the right circle on the power play, where it's felt like he's had so many chances this season with the man advantage. When the Wings did get set up in the offensive zone on the power play in this game, there were moments of very slick puck movement, and Zadina's 2nd goal was certainly a byproduct of that. In recent years for Detroit, defense has been an issue, and that narrative crept into the latter stages of the second and early third period on Thursday. A couple of defensive breakdowns and a turnover in their own end turned what was once a 2-1 lead into a 4-2 deficit for the Wings, where the Canes were able to capitalize and end the game with an empty netter, 5-2. Now, Jason, there is not a drop-off in offensive proficiency.
Certainly can't be a drop-off in defensive communication for the Wings because of that. Finding your spots defensively and being responsible in your own end, forward supporting the D. But all of those things will be very important when it comes to this matchup with the Lightning here on Tuesday and Thursday at Little Caesars Arena. Tampa Bay is coming off a 6-3 victory over Chicago on Sunday afternoon. Just another example of their offensive proficiency. As you noted, G, they have 83 goals through 23 games so far, which is 3rd in the NHL. The Lightning possess individuals that can really hurt you, such as Braden Point, who's on a red-hot line right now with Andre Palat and Anthony Cirelli. Then you have Steven Stamkos, of course, who we didn't mention there on their 2nd line, however, leading the team in goals so far this year. So plenty of names to key in on. What I'm getting at is they come at you in waves, and it's difficult to stop.
Absolutely. We'll just have to wait and see how that matchup turns out. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Motor City Roundup. We enjoy having you guys along for the ride. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share our content. If you have any questions, please just leave them down in the comments below. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. I'm Genna Rose for Jason Ross Jr. Enjoy the rest of your week.